Morning, everybody. I'm Carl Blackstone, President and CEO of the Columbia Chamber, and we're delighted to have you join us today. And as we kick off a town hall meeting with two of my favorite folks, Judi Gatson with WIS and General Beagle. For those that see Judi every day on the news, she is a great part of this community. Not only is she a mom and a newscaster or a great reporter, but she's also a spouse of a military officer. So Colonel Dwayne Gatson, so she understands what it means to have a family member in service to this country. So we thank Judi for her service as a military spouse, but what she also brings to the table as a champion of the military here in Columbia. So we thank you, Judi, for being with us today, and really delighted to introduce Brigadier General Milford Beagle, affectionately known as Biggs. Biggs has been in Columbia as the commanding general, the 51st commanding general of Fort Jackson for the last almost 3 years. And we've been fortunate, and I mean that sincerely, we've been fortunate that normally those things turn over 2 years, but we were able to snag him for an additional year. And it's much to the benefit of Columbia and the greater Midlands that we've had him here. So Biggs, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. We're excited.
No, thank you.
A couple of housekeeping things. We've got some questions for Biggs. And then if you have a question, feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your chat and throw it in there. We'll be happy to answer it or get Biggs to answer it. I'm not going to answer it, but Biggs can do that. So feel free to participate. We'd love to get some input from y'all. But let me set the stage real quick, and I'm going to turn it over to Judi. Why is this so important? Why is Fort Jackson so important to us from the business side of things? It's a huge economic engine for this community. Interesting story. It was 1916 when 5 business leaders sat in Columbia and said, we need a military installation here. So they raised $50,000 and bought 1,100 acres of land where currently Fort Jackson resides. And so it has been a banner public-private partnership for over 100 years. And so what it means today is Fort Jackson is about a $2.4 billion engine for us in the Midlands. From an employment standpoint, but bring in the folks that we see every week. Families come down for graduations prior to COVID, but we look forward to having them back here soon. So it's a huge issue for us for jobs, creating a stronger economy here in Columbia that we have Fort Jackson. So it's a huge investment. So let's do this. If I can, let me start off with one quick question, and then I'll turn it over to Judi. Because this year, as I mentioned, we haven't had the graduations, but I will tell you what, nothing has stopped out at Fort Jackson. And General Beagle, you have said, and I don't want to steal your line, but you've often said COVID changes how you do things, not what you do. So can you give just the overshoot of what's going on at Jackson and how you've managed during this pandemic, and what does it look like coming up?
Yeah, no, great call, and happy Friday to everybody, Judi. Happy Friday to you as well, and thank you for moderating this. This is awesome. And what I would tell you, Carl, absolutely. I've said that since day one, since the start of the pandemic. COVID will change, how we do things, but it's not going to change what we do. And we've adapted real time with COVID throughout this. And it's not only because of our efforts here on installation, it's our efforts of, everybody else that supports our installation. The retirees, the beneficiaries. So it's allowed us to, we've had to pause things and take things offline, but we've brought so many things back online. The last of which you mentioned is graduation. That's a big piece that we'll get to, and I can cover some more information on that later. But in terms of our throughput, that hasn't slowed. In terms of our projects, construction, those type things, hasn't slowed, drastically at all given COVID. If anything, we've continued or accelerated a lot of things across the installation. We continue to lead because we're the largest. And as we do things here, that sets the conditions for everybody else. All the other locations that we send soldiers to, our other counterpart installations that look at us for how we do things. So that's not, a pat on the back for me. That's truly everybody doing their part, doing their piece, through the pandemic to allow us to do what we do. Just this morning, I was at our CDCs, our childcare, and I told them, I mean, what you do is vital. If you don't, watch these kids do the things that you need to do, then our workforce, they can't come in and drop their kids off and go to work and focus. And it's those little efforts that, everybody's just really been rolling up their sleeves to help us out overall. And I think things are going to get better. And I'll give some more insights on that as we go.
Great. So just one last question for you. Everybody knows you do basic combat training. Talk about the other programs. It's not just basic combat at Jackson. There's other schools, just to make everybody aware of what y'all do. What are the other programs?
Yeah, so I'll put you in the mindset I put new visitors, in, or our senior leaders when they come in. We've had a lot of senior leaders come here repeatedly over my 30 plus months here. And the one thing I'll tell them, and it gains their attention, is I say Fort Jackson has a lot of onlys. And they look at me and like, only what? We have your only physical fitness school in the Army. We have your only chaplain school, in the Army. We have your only postal school, which is also, led and ran by Marines. And so unique that you would have Marines here on Fort Jackson, but we do. They run the postal school. Then we have our Task Force Marshal, which is the Navy component, and we train the Navy, on Camp McGrady, our National Guard, compound that's connected to Fort Jackson, so that they can deploy. So we train the Navy. Then you have the Master Resiliency School. Only one that we have in the Army is here. You have the Drill Sergeant Academy, which supplies drill sergeants to all the other training locations. That's here. We have the only one. And the Adjutant General Finance Corps schools, all of those. Only one we have in the Army is here. And that produces all of our financiers, our Adjutant General folks. And then we recently, it moved from Fort Bragg, North Carolina to us, is Civil Affairs and PsyOps. So we gained that here as well. So a lot of things that we have that others don't have in our training enterprise.
Wow, that's a lot. If I remember, it's over 70,000 graduates a year through different programs, majority obviously PCT, but that's great. Judi, I'm gonna kick it to you, and thank you for helping us today, Judi.
Listen, good morning, everybody. I am so excited about this town hall and about this community because, everybody, of course, knows about Fort Jackson, but sometimes I feel like, especially when new people move to our community, they feel like the fort is kind of off to itself. And Carl, that's what I love about the great work that you and the Columbia Chamber have done to let everybody know that the Fort Jackson is a part of our community, and it's a part of our community that we love. And General Beagle, we're missing you already. We'll talk a little bit more about what's ahead for you down the road. But as a military wife, I got that hua spirit this morning. Can y'all feel it?
Yeah, yes.
As a military wife, though, it's just so important for me, for our community at large, to understand the service, the dedication, the commitment of the soldiers and the civilians who work on Fort Jackson every single day. And Carl, you touched on just the economic impact. I think that that's, a benefit of Fort Jackson that a lot of people, it's easy to overlook, but it is unmistakable on the impact of our community when you see all of those families come in. And we'll talk a little bit about graduations, but and all of the things that we welcome people from around the country to come and visit our great community. But as an Army wife, and Dwayne now is in ROTC, it has really just meant a lot to me to be in a community that appreciates our military so much. So General Beagle, I'm not going to go too much longer. We want to save time for our questions coming in on Facebook Live. We got a lot of people joining us. Thrilled to have you all with us this morning. This is your personal invitation to come to the fort, to learn more about Fort Jackson, what it means to our community. And General Beagle's always so great about answering any questions we throw his way. So we appreciate all the great questions we're getting. General Beagle, I want to start by touching on the COVID response, because you and I talked early on, we launched our WIS Today show because, when this thing hit, all of us were trying to figure out what would it mean. But it was so impressive. And I mean, I guess that's really what the Army does, right? We mobilize and solve problems. But it was so impressive the way that you and your team at Fort Jackson mobilized that COVID-19 response and really set a standard for the community for all of us to kind of follow along. Can you talk to us a little bit about the current COVID measures in place at Fort Jackson? Whether you have employees back working full time, how the trainees are being kept safe in their bubbles, because they're still on the job over there. They're still full service in duty.
Right. Yeah. So we've maintained our bubble, as we call it, and that's where we started. And part of that, mantra was protect the force, protect the mission. So really it became protect the workforce first. Then we could get to our mission. And by doing that, putting all the measures, protocols, guidelines in place, which were very helpful. And this was before we had tests, before we had vaccines, those type things. So we just had to be very mindful of what's the most critical thing we need to protect. And it's the workforce, across the board. 70% of that workforce lives off the installation. They live in the community. So we don't want to increase risk for us or the community. But just as a very quick, rundown of, when that new recruit comes in, when they come to Columbia Airport, we start our screening from that point right there, with the mask, temperature checks, those type of things. Now that we do have tests online, we got those about 2 months into the pandemic. They get a first test as soon as they arrive here. They get a second test 14 days later. And we keep them separated through dispersion, as we call it, for the first 2 weeks. They continue to train, but they're not going out around the post or anything else. And once we are sure that we have all of the virus eradicated out of that formation, then they continue to train. For the workforce, we now have the vaccine. So we're continuing to vaccinate our workforce population. We haven't gotten to the trainee population yet, because again, it's about the workforce getting there. We can protect the trainees, the soldiers, if they do contract the virus. We have separate isolation facilities where we put them there for 10 to 14 days, make sure they're recovered. We get them all the things that they need in terms of mental health, resiliency, before we bring them back into training. And we have great partnerships outside of our gates with Prisma and some of the others out there in our healthcare network. And we've not yet had a case where we've had to hospitalize a trainee or any of our cadre members for a prolonged time. But if we do, and given bed space and how that's ebbed and flowed over time, they're there to help us. And that's great. That partnership has manifested itself in many ways. All of our retirees, beneficiaries, they have access. We didn't start that way initially because we had to. We just had to see and get a read on where the virus was going. And once we did and got our things and procedures in place, then our retirees, beneficiaries, they have access just like they did pre-COVID. And they've been very helpful and mindful of what they do when they come on the post, when they leave the installation, so that they don't increase risk one way or the other. And we're almost to the point of being like fully back up online. Minus the mask, you probably never know the pandemic is going, here on the installation.
Well, I thank you for addressing the question about retirees, because my husband was asking about which days he's allowed on post. I said, you got to join the community town hall and find out. So you've already talked about that.
Dwayne could come every day.
Anytime,
every day.
Right? That's what I thought. I told him I heard that on the news, but anyway, I told him he had to tune into the town hall to find out. General Beagle, you touched on the isolation procedure for a trainee if they do test positive. And I know you have been so responsive to family concerns for them knowing, that once they're on Fort Jackson, they're safe. Can you talk a little bit more about those protocols, how they've worked for you, if you've had to change them over the course of the last year?
Yeah, so we haven't had to change them. Once they, we do the test, they, a trainee is found to be positive. When they go into isolation, we have a completely different set of cadre, which includes medics that will monitor them. A lot are asymptomatic is what we found over time. And we also found that with those that are asymptomatic, there's things that we can continue to do with them. So book knowledge, learning, those type things will continue. Some are able to do a little bit of physical activity while they're there, but they're all on a different part of the installation where they're constantly monitored every day. As they're there, depending on what their condition is, they get frequent touch points with their families just to keep them updated on their status, how they're doing, how they're feeling. A key component for us is resiliency, because now you came in with a cohort when you left Columbia Airport. Now you're no longer with that cohort. That impacts you a bit mentally and just kind of your spirit and your drive, your motivation. So we monitor them very closely for that. We've rarely seen a case, if ever, since I've been here, where somebody's gone beyond 14 days, because the population that we have, very healthy, but they get another medical assessment and check, and then they're reinserted back in the training. And then they, again, call home, I'm reinserted in the training. And we've had over 4,000 that have been reinserted, into the training pipeline, going through our isolation, being taken care of, and very few that have had to be separated because of, further complications with COVID. But those numbers are well below even a point percentage that have had, some type of, due to asthma or something related to that, to where they could not complete the training, but they can come back.
Well, that's phenomenal. And it makes the point that at Fort Jackson, you're not just taking care of the physical aspect, of training, but also the emotional health, the social health, and all of that, the overall well-being of our soldiers while they're going through training and getting that intensive training there at the fort. That brings me to graduations. I think Carl touched on it earlier about the huge impact. And I don't know if people realize, I just want to share a few statistics. Graduations bring in over an estimated 250,000 visitors to the Columbia area. And at last count, they spend about $45 million locally. What an incredible number in restaurants, hotels, local attractions. So there is a huge impact. Obviously, since COVID, you had to put some restrictions there. I mean, you have people coming in literally from around the country to celebrate this special day. But General Beagle, I have to tell you, even thinking about it right now, I get goosebumps about Family Day and about Fort Jackson. Give us an update on where you are right now and what you see as the timeline for resuming those incredible celebrations.
Yeah, and Judi, I answer that question every week because I have town halls with the families, and there's, like you said, plenty of families out there, and that's been the number one question since day one. And where I started, I said, as conditions change, as we see conditions change, then we'll move closer and get back to family days and graduations. Well, it's been a year. Still get that question, the number one question, but it still is about the conditions and about keeping the risk low. Because as you mentioned, every week you break that 250,000 down for us and our community, that's 2,000 to 3,000 per week. That's coming in, from a Tuesday to a Friday, in some cases Saturday, that's here. And then another, group of families the very next week. And there's 2 weeks out of the year that we don't do that during Christmas where we shut down. So that increases risk, not only for us, but for our community, especially during the early days of the virus, the pandemic. And you don't want that to spread further in our community. And so as we look forward, granted, conditions have gotten better here on installation. We are very good at, doing our business, executing our mission. But I had a conversation, I don't mind saying this publicly, with my boss this morning, actually the last couple of days, of, how do we do this right? Because again, we will be looked at because we're the largest of all of our training installations. If we can do it first and we can do it right, then we can get back to, family days, graduations, and hopefully over the summer, just given where everybody is across the country, which is another caveat that most people don't really get to see. I mean, every week you're talking from Maine to Utah to California, they're coming here. It's not just local areas and, the tri-state area on the East Coast. It is everywhere. And in some cases across the globe where some of these families are coming from. So what we're going to try to do, hopefully I can get this started, by next month. I've got to get a couple of approvals, but I've laid out a framework of we have to start low, kind of like you see with football games, basketball games. What's the number that we can bring in safely? And then how much higher can we grow over time and not put ourselves at risk? I don't like going back. Anybody on my team, I don't like going backwards. Reverse is not a gear at Fort Jackson. And everything that we brought online, we've not had to take a step back on any of it to bringing kids back to school. And I don't want to do that with family day or graduation. So I think that approach, as we get to the summer, close to the summer, to figure out what the number is, how many can we bring in safely without creating additional risk for the community or us. That's the framework of how we're going to go. And hopefully I can get to that before I leave and then leave my successor a foundation to work off of, and you keep growing it from there.
Well, we appreciate your cautious optimism on that front, because I know as anxious as families are to return for those incredible celebrations, the only thing that would be more disappointing would be to say we're going to do that and then have to pull that back. So right. We appreciate your approach in the way that you're assessing that to make sure that we're ready for it when the time comes so that everybody can fully enjoy it. General Beagle, also getting questions about construction projects at Fort Jackson. It's been a while since I've gone all around the base, but I hear that you've gotten a pretty sizable budget for it. Can you talk to us a little bit about how much you're getting for those projects and what they'll be?
Yeah, and I love bragging about, a lot of things on Fort Jackson, but I say when you come on Fort Jackson, the next time you come, you're going to see a lot of construction and a lot of demolition. And that's good. That's healthy for, our community, for, our installation. But the bigger projects, and these play out over time. So there's a lot of projects that, I'm able to set and play that won't play out until, 2023 through 27, based on how Army and Department of Defense budgets work, but things that we've already set. But the biggest one, of course, is the dam. That's been going for a while, Sims Dam. And that's a very high dollar amount, above $20 million for that dam. And I know we may circle back to that one later. There's basic training barracks that we've had created. And those bills for that are over 50 million. And the good thing about these is not so much the money, but what does that mean to the community? A lot of the contracts, the subcontracts, they go local. They go local to the community. So that is, again, something that, catches a lot of people's attention with, where does that work go? Who's doing that work? And we have additional work, Dominion Energy. They're constantly doing a lot of work on the installation. Our future work is our reception complex, the very first place our new recruits see when they come to Fort Jackson, getting that completely redone and revamped. And that work has been ongoing with some of the barracks there. And then over time, given higher senior leader priorities, like our child care development centers, those type things. But always a level of continuing to improve our fighting position, as we call it, improve your foxhole, just never be happy with it, continues.
Fantastic. We want to thank Rod for joining us this morning. We want to thank Cheryl for joining us. We've got some good questions coming in. General Beagle, I know you touched on this a little bit, but can you give us some insight? I see a few people asking some questions about local contractors, if they are eligible to bid on these projects and what that process involves.
Yeah, so just the short story on that process is they would work through our garrison, our Department of Public Works, and that's kind of the first entry point in to know what's out there to bid on. And it's exactly the way you described it. They do bids like you would anywhere else. So whatever projects that come up that's unique for a certain business that's out there, then they would put their bids in, and then all of those are looked at. We don't approve them here at the local level, but they're checked, they're audited by others outside of Fort Jackson to go, okay, who's has the best bid, the contracts, the quality, the time it's going to take to have those things completed, and other things that they'll put in the contract, all happen through our Department of Public Works. And, I would say, lean there first. And there are many things that, go through that process that occur here on Fort Jackson.
Before I get to my next question, I have to give you a comment from Facebook Live. It's from Cheryl Woodhouse, who says, congratulations to Brigadier General Beagle for providing us one of the safest places to get a COVID shot. She said that she provided her journey. She was fearful of getting the shot, but it was such a great experience. So she just wants to thank you for giving her that peace of mind. That they said watching your leadership has been a really proud moment for them. So a big shout out to you and the entire team at Fort Jackson for what you've done on that front, General Beagle.
No, awesome. And thank her for the shout out. Our medical team is top notch, and they've just been crushing it with, getting shots in arms and doing it right. And so I'm very proud of them and their work.
Well, listen, they gave me my flu shot a while ago, and I did not cry. So that was, they were amazing. I didn't pass out. I didn't cry or anything. I didn't even feel it. So I love our team over at Moncrief. I give them all the love every opportunity I get. General Beagle, going back to the construction projects that you talked about, I mean, obviously that's a huge financial investment. It makes me think back, to the base realignment and closure, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But, a lot of questions always come up about the longevity of Fort Jackson. And obviously we're a great American defense community, so we're very proud of that. But, the climate changes constantly. What do you think this huge investment means about the longevity of our fort?
Yeah, a lot of it is things that you can't see. So when I mentioned Dominion Energy and what they're doing, I mean, we have over 160 miles of above ground power lines, as an example. To most folks, that really doesn't mean a whole lot. But to us and for our taxpayers, that means a lot of power outages. You think about the weather that would have moved through yesterday. You think about the weather that moves through during the summer. That's power outages, and that's a lot of energy wasted. I mean, water leaks, because our infrastructure is over 100 years old, and things that we're doing just to work our infrastructure. Things you can see above ground, but things that you can't see. We're working all of those. I mean, a big effort will be energy efficiency. Go green. Those type of initiatives. We haven't started any now, but just to do better with what we have, be more efficient with what we have. Those things are ongoing, as we speak, every single day. That increases our longevity, because now we're better above ground, below ground, and in between for that longevity of the installation. We have to take care of both, and we've been able to really laser focus, in those two areas primarily, those things that make us better over time, because we've taken care of our substructure and things along those lines.
Well, I want to invite our viewers. I'm looking at your comments. Rod Celestin says Brigadier General promotable. Milford Beagle is the best. Absolutely solid leadership. I want to invite you guys to post your questions either on one of the Facebook Live feeds or in the Q&A forum here, and we'll cover as many as we can. General Beagle mentioned BRAC a moment ago. Are you hearing any rumblings on that front related to Fort Jackson right now?
Yeah, not with regard to Fort Jackson. So there's always a rumbling about BRAC. So they're, periodically they'll send out a list of where they're going to look. And I think anywhere, excuse me, any state that has an installation, they get a little bit, spooked when they're on that list, but it's a constant process of looking, looking for efficiencies, effectiveness. And, we weren't on the most recent list, but that's just the look. They're going to go check that installation, check that community and see how they're doing. My personal opinion, my professional opinion, is that, Fort Jackson is a pretty solid spot, but that does not mean that we can rest on our laurels. We can talk about the 5 million soldiers we've trained since 1917, but we have to retain our relevance. And that's where, again, as you mentioned, the projects that we do, the construction that we do, how good are we at our mission? How closely are we linked to our community? That's relevance. And the more relevant you are, the harder it's going to make it for others to make a decision to go, yeah, it may be easier to do what you do somewhere else. There's no one that can do what we do at Fort Jackson at the scale that we do it. But again, I can't rest on those laurels. But your last question was perfect with, what are we doing with infrastructure, that connection with the community? How much is our reliance on the community? How much does the community help us do the things that we're doing? That's relevance to me all day long. And we have it in spades. So I think our position where we sit, we're just making that position firmer. And I put it that way, just to kind of give you a read of, where I see it, and in terms of the long term down the road, think relevance and think just firming our position as our community embraces us and as we partner with our community to do what we do and do it better than anybody else. That makes it hard for decision makers.
Well, I know, switching gears a little bit toward education, how much you appreciate the education. You talked a little bit about, the students returning there on Fort Jackson, but also something else to be incredibly proud of. Richland District 1 and Richland District 2 have been designated as Purple Star districts by the South Carolina Department of Education, which is just incredible. And I don't know, I know a lot about what that means because we've covered it, but our folks watching with us on Facebook this morning might not understand just how important and how significant those partnerships are. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, it gives me goosebumps, Judi, when you talk about it, because I mean, out of the 5 we have in the state, I've been to 3 of them. I wish I could have gone to the other 2 because they're so critical. And I tell folks whenever I'm out in the community, there are 3 things any military family or veteran that is going to decide to stay in an area that has an installation, 3 things they're worried about. 1 is spouse employment, the other is healthcare, and the 3rd is education. They're key. That's the first thing any spouse or family is going to look up before they move to a location. So you have to be right in those areas in that community and on that installation. And what the Purple Star District means is for those families that are constantly moving. I use my own example oftentimes of, my oldest son who attended 10 different schools in 12 years. My youngest son attended 11 different schools in 12 years. So their number one consistency is inconsistency. And most parents, all parents, want that consistency in the schools primarily. So what that does for a district is they have their liaisons, they have their ambassadors. So now their liaisons at the district level can reach out to those new parents that are coming in. They can link them into our liaisons here that we have on installation. For the kids, their ambassador program will just melt your heart because the ambassadors that they signify or designate in the schools, they're those same, military connected kids that have moved around. So their first touch point, they're sponsoring other military connected kids when they come in the community. That is a huge relief and burden, off of those parents. And the fact that the school is cutting through and the district is cut through so much red tape and barriers for those families that are moving. And they don't always move, during the typical times. So in summer, it may be December, off times, and their children have to plug back in. And so being a Purple Star district is just phenomenal in the fact that they can cut through a lot of things, make that adjustment a lot easier, specifically for the children and for the parents as well, for them to continue their education, not have big breaks in it, and reduce anxiety is the biggest thing that does as well. And it makes us closer. So I appreciate Dr. Witherspoon, Dr. Davis. We are all like tight when it comes to that because we're on the same understanding when it comes to our children, our military connected kids, and what they do for us.
Yeah, that's right. The commitment is absolutely unwavering. For everyone joining us this morning, first of all, thank you for taking time to join our amazing community town hall hosted by the Columbia Chamber. We're with Brigadier General Beagle answering as many of your questions as we can. We have about 14 minutes left, so get your questions in as quickly as you can. We'll cover as much ground as we can. General Beagle, L. Turner Whedon says, thank you so much that you've put her mind at ease. Also, Cheryl Woodhouse says, on behalf of the U.S. Army Recruiting Battalion, thank you for helping us with the outreach and network through South Carolina. So everyone really enjoying this opportunity to hear from you this morning. I want to talk about the flood of 2015, because that was another situation where we saw Fort Jackson just mobilize an incredible response. Can you talk a little bit, General Beagle, about the repairs that have been done to the dam there, really in an effort to kind of make sure, I mean, that was unprecedented and something no one, anticipated, but obviously work is being done now to try and make sure nothing like that ever happens again.
Yeah, and Judi, I was here in 2015 when the flood happened, and woke up the next day, and the lake is not too far from where I lived then, where we lived, and it was gone. And my immediate instinct was to follow the water. Where did the water go? It went into the community, and so that being a concern. Granted, I wasn't the commander at the time, and that was concern number one, because where did the water go and what damage did it do? So coming back, knowing some of that history and the things that have gone on since then, the work projects now to repair and rebuild that dam. I've seen it, touched it many times. We've had the governor here to see it, touch it. And a lot of that information we've placed out there so that our community can keep tabs on, what that dam looks like. What does that mean? And the way that thing is built now, with the investment of over $20 million, they call it a weir system. And it's kind of like a lazy W if you think of it that way. That thing is, guaranteed, and the Corps of Engineers, provide those guarantees to us. You would have another 1,000-year flood. That is not going anywhere because of that concern with the community, the damage that was done back in 2015. And there was a lot of effort, on the post to help the community, but not as much as, we can provide in those emergency situations. But to ensure that doesn't happen again, we've been laser focused on that. And that didn't leave me when I left my job last time. When I went to the Pentagon to work there, my boss, part of his focus was dams, and I was able to be very versant in it, having been here, and then coming back and seeing where we are and keeping close touch points on it. It's going to be a great thing. It's needed because of how Fort Jackson works, and a lot of people don't understand that. Our hydrology on the installation works to where a lot of water flows that way, and so if that's fixed, then we could potentially have another major flood and not worry about that dam breaking or anything along those lines, because a lot of thought, a lot of work, a lot of research has been put into that particular design that we currently have.
Another issue that I know is very important to you, General Beagle, and in fact, next month, April, is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I know that overall, the Department of Defense has issued instructions for all military to review their standards for managing personnel within their commands with regard to promotions, sexual harassment, sexual assault, suicide, racism, and extremism. Again, like I said, I know that all of these issues are at the forefront for you, and you have addressed them in a lot of different ways, but in the time that we have now, can you give us just some insight about how you've addressed and dealt with those issues and what you've accomplished on that front at Fort Jackson?
Yeah, Judi, that's a great question. And it is. It's always at the front of our minds when we deal with those things at the higher levels. We term those the corrosives. I mean, that erodes at our good order, and discipline. If you don't take care of your people, those type of things will happen. Your sexual assault, your sexual harassments, your extremism, your racism, those type things. And so it's a constant focus on educating our leaders at all echelons. We did a listening session last night with myself and my leaders, talking about everything you just mentioned, as we term them the three corrosives, plus additional things to inform people. Here's what we're dealing with. Here's how we need to deal with it. And a lot of it is through the conversations. A lot of it deals with just human things of emotional intelligence. We talk at that level. You have to recognize certain things. The personal courage, one of our Army values, you have to have the personal courage. When things are not right, somebody's doing something to you, you can't sit and suffer in silence. And leaders have to know how to handle those things and handle them quickly to build that trust, because we're not going to know issues are there if the trust is not built. So I spend a lot of time focusing on the leaders so they understand what they have to do so we can build the trust and we stay a respected institution, because that is not a good reflection of us, to our public that we serve. And a constant education, all the brief updates to me on those topics, I take. That's a leader, my responsibility, and my subordinate leaders, the same for them. And we follow through this week alone, what we call the Army Profession Week. We've had to stand ourselves down to refresh everybody at Echelon on all those areas that you mentioned.
General Beagle, I think a lot of people know that you have two sons, and as a soldier and a commander, what would you tell today's young adults about a life of service in the military and even career opportunities?
Yeah, I would first tell them, Judi, about the opportunities, because a lot of the youth, they don't know about the opportunities. When you have over 150 different jobs that they could gain skills on, from veterinarian to pilot to, even fixed wing pilot. People don't think we have, fixed wing aircraft. Actually, the Army has more boats than the Navy. Most people don't know that. So they can learn how to drive boats if they want to. But 150, a lot of people don't know that the Army gives out more scholarships than any institution, any education institution in our country. The Army does that, not the other schools that you can potentially think of. And they don't know those two things. So it's the opportunities, the education that you could get that will serve you well, even if you don't do a career in the military, and what it does for you to serve a purpose, a common purpose that is larger than yourself. And we consider the Army a meritocracy, like all of our services. You think about me growing up in a very small town, less than 1,000 here in South Carolina, and where I sit now, because the Army is a meritocracy. You can go as high as you want to go based on your own merit, and putting in the work and doing things that you really want to do, you have a passion for doing. The sky's going to be the limit for you, and I'm living proof of that. And I would tell them about those opportunities that they have to make themselves better, to make their family proud of them, and then to serve a purpose, which is the greatest purpose that we have in the world, to serve, to protect our great public, our great nation, and ensure that everybody has the freedoms that you enjoy today. There's no greater purpose out there to provide that service for our nation.
We have about 6 minutes left, General Beagle, so I'm going to try and do a couple of rapid fire as quickly as we can. Okay. We have obviously a very large veteran population, and obviously this is a place where veterans like to come back and retire. But what can we do to make it even more attractive, even more desirable for our veterans who have served and given so much to our country?
I mean, I go back to my three areas, and I know you want to be quick, is, the spouse employment and even employment for them. Because a lot of time you'll find that, our veterans get cherry picked, to use that term, to other states. I mean, so in terms of our employment, we have to think, about our veterans, the education, and not just for the children, but education opportunities for them. And I think our universities and schools, even our technical schools here in the Midlands, do a phenomenal job, for our veterans and their spouses to make sure they have the skills that they need. I don't want to get any of the presidents out there mad at me and pick out one, but they do those things, and it's very helpful. And the healthcare network, that's going to be the big thing. How responsive is it? How much do we have? And how well is the care? And we have that as well. We have a great healthcare network in the community, but continue to focus and get better in those three areas. That will keep our veterans and their spouses and families here with us.
Well, as you prepare for your promotion and to move on to your next assignment, can you tell us a little bit, and I know this is a lot to ask you to do in the couple minutes we have left, but what it is that you will carry with you from Fort Jackson and the advice that you have for your successor?
Yeah, I think I may start with the advice first, but I'll tell them, have fun. If you can't have fun in this job, I mean, bad things are going to happen to good people, bad things will happen to good units, but you have to have fun. I mean, this is something we get to do. And I often tell people there's things you get to do and things you have to do. There's nothing I have to do. I get to do this interview with you today. I get to wear this uniform. I get to do a lot of stuff every single day. So, and I have fun with doing it because I realize it's what I get to do and not what I have to do. Take care of everybody under your charge is the other key piece of advice, and embrace the community. You have to embrace the community because the community is going to be there for you. It's kind of like a spouse. Community is always going to be there for you, good, bad, and indifferent. And this community has been there for me, good, bad, and indifferent. And you have to embrace that. And I would not wish him luck. And people hear that as odd because luck is nothing more than preparation and opportunity. And given what we do, we're prepared for any job that will come before us. But now you have the opportunity, and those two are going to come together. And so you're prepared for it. But I take away, just the special relationship I've had here with everybody. I spent this morning with Leon Lott, Sheriff Lott. I told him I had to get to his office before I left because it's got more stuff in it than mine. So I had to get there. And just to have a relationship like that with you, all of our media is just great. And taking that with me, and then the memories of the things that we accomplished together by working together and rolling up our sleeves together is something for sure that I will take in my kit bag as I go.
Well, that's one thing about the Army family. We're connected no matter where we are around the world. One more question from one of our viewers, and it's a great one. You're going to love this, General Beagle. He wants to know, it's Mayor Lance Scholl from Batesburg, Leesville, who wants to know what book you're reading. And I know you love to make book recommendations to other leaders.
Yeah. Well, Lance, thank you for the question. I just finished reading Tribe, which is awesome. Short read, but it's great. And it talks about belonging, and how we are connected. That's a great read. Just finished that one. Right now I'm reading Command. And even though I'm in command, that's another great read. A lot of historical, if you're kind of on the history side of things, but I would recommend Tribe. Read that. You will be blown away. And you'll also get an understanding of why it is we need to all feel connected to each other and our belonging, and what gives us that sense and purpose of belonging. And so I won't spoil it, but it will tell you, you belong when, you would share what you have, the last thing that you have with the people that are around you. You belong, they belong. And so Lance, go get that one, please. Thanks for the question.
That was a great question. General Beagle, I'm going to give you 30 seconds for this because I'm going to toss it back to Carl, but it's a great segue and transition. First, let me say what an honor it was to be a part of this town hall with you. Our love and support and gratitude to you and your beautiful wife, Pam, and your entire family for what you have done for our Fort Jackson community. In 30 seconds or less, and we hand it back to Carl, just tell us about the support you would like to see from the greater Columbia community.
And it's not any different than what I laid out before. I mean, the current support that's provided, I mean, I really couldn't think of anything different or new. Continue, get better at, that support. Just please continue, that support to me, to Pam, our team here is second to none. That's why we're a great American defense community. We're not only live in the community, we're a part of it. So maintaining that, sustaining that is exactly where we need to go.
Hey, General, thank you. Judi, thank you so much for asking these questions. Biggs, thank you for your time. Thank you for your friendship. We're not kicking you and Pam out, but y'all come back anytime. We're excited for the new leadership. We're excited for you and your next opportunity at Fort Drum. Don't forget us.
I won't. It's home, so we have to come back home. So you'll see us around for sure. Right. And thank you, Carl. Thank you, Judi. I really appreciate it.
We thoroughly enjoyed it as well. Listen, check back on the website. If we're going to answer all these questions, but we'll also have this on our website as well as Fort Jackson's website as well. So if you missed an answer, come back and check it out a little bit later. But anyway, thanks for being with us, General. Judi, thank you very much. Y'all have a great day.
Victory starts here.
Vic, you got it. There you go.